This is what I look like after my first try of querying. And the reason for it, querying is where I'm working to try and get an agent and getting rejected like crazy and just beaten to heck. So if we have time, I'll tell you the actual story behind this. It's actually pretty funny. But anyway, after my first try at querying, I totally was struggling. I just was beaten down. And the reason why is because my first chapter wasn't very good. I didn't know how to effectively hook an audience. I didn't know how to get big conflict out into the open right away. Some of you are like staring at this like, oh, I'm going to be sick. So we're going to move on and get really close. How to beat your first chapter before it beats you, and I'll move on. Just for the sake of, your stomachs. So your first chapter is a sneaky opponent. We're going to talk about 5 wrestling moves that you can use to help you with your first chapter. Things that you really can't live without if you're trying to hook an audience and get a good grade in Miss Walker's class. But before we go there, I want to talk about your first line. Many readers say they can tell whether they will like your book just by reading the first sentence. So what makes a good first sentence? Here's a few samples. This is from Catcher in the Rye. If you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born and what my lousy childhood was like and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like going into it if you want to know the truth. Why is that a good first sentence?
Teenage girl.
Okay. Why do you think they're teenage?
Because what teenager wants to tell people about their entire childhood?
But wait, he didn't say that they were teenage. He was a teenager.
That's what a teenager would say.
They're leaving a mystery.
You can tell by his voice. He's keeping his audience in suspense. He's letting them figure things out on their own. That's really good. Why is this good? Because there's personality, right? In writing, we call it voice. It makes you want to read. Like, you'd probably like this person, right? Instead of saying something really formal or talking about the trees or breeze waving through the trees, you're getting to know a character right away, and you kind of know a lot about them in one phrase. Here's another one. It was a wrong number that started it, the telephone ringing 3 times the dead of night, and the voice on the other end asking for someone he was not. So why is that good?
I'm thinking of like creepy person.
Okay, so you automatically have assumed there is a certain tone to the book, right?
Yeah.
What kind of book is this?
Scary.
It's scary. It's kind of intense. Obviously, we're stepping right into a mystery of some sort, something that's dark. There's going to be lurking things around corners. We are assuming a lot, and all from first sentence, one line. Okay, let's do another one. I always mess up his name, so if I say it wrong, correct me. There was a boy called Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it.
That's mean.
Okay, why is this a good first line? This is Voyage of Dawn Treader. Why is this a good first line?
It's a horrible name, and he's a horrible person.
Oh,
So we already know that he is not a good person. But what do we know we're in for with this book? The way that this is written, instead of coming out and saying, Eustace Clarence Scrubb was a jerk.
It's Eustace.
Eustace, thank you. Thank you. I knew I said it wrong. Eustace. I should have figured that one out before. Instead of just coming out and saying it, it was told in a really clever, funny way. I know as I pick up this book, this is going to be a clever read. This is going to be witty and fun, and the author of this book is going to let me enjoy this story in a unique way instead of just throwing it out and saying, here is all your information. Yeah? Okay. Here's my last one. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. That's It sounds like a quote, right? It's actually the beginning of a book. But again, the wordplay is really good. It's clever. We know there's a conflict right from the get-go. That very first line, we have a conflict. What's our conflict?
The person who wrote this probably has an unhappy family.
Unhappy family. There's obviously going to be a big problem with this family, and throughout the course of the book, we're going to figure it out. One sentence, guys. I want to actually, we'll do one more. Has anybody read Maggie Steffavater? This is the Raven Boys. She also wrote Shiver and Linger and all of those books. And they're pretty good. This is her best book. Can I just be, in my opinion, I think that this is the best thing she's ever written. It is awesome. This is her first line. Blue Sergeant had forgotten how many times she'd been told that she would kill her true love.
Well then.
Instant conflict, right? Jumping right into the scene. Speaking of jumping right into the scene, let's move on. Okay, this is point number 1. So, your notes, take good notes. First line is important. You're setting tone. You're showing voice, right? Introducing conflict right away. So, that's like your prologue point. Here's point number 1. The first thing you need to know about writing a first chapter is, what is the problem? Your hero or heroine should have a dilemma right away. It can be something that he or she has created, an issue that someone else incites, be it revenge, grief, hate, love, obsession, whatever, an accident, or even a natural disaster. From the very beginning, we need to know what the problem is, because guess what, guys? If there's not a problem, you don't have a story. Okay? Stories are conflict and resolution. And if you just start out with, it was a nice warm day in the summer, and I was going out to milk the cows, and she milks the cows, and she comes back and nothing else happens, you've just wasted time. But maybe we know the color of your protagonist's hair, or, that she likes the color yellow. Those aren't important. We need conflict right away. So, whether they're in a dangerous situation, there's a stroke of bad luck, maybe. That one, let's go back to that. That does not look possible. I think that's fake. I'm calling BS on that. Just so you know. A bad omen on a big day, maybe. A tight spot. Or maybe it's just character building action. But it has to be something that is strong and introduces the characters right away. Next point. How am I doing? Enter the scene late. Okay. This is point number 2. All right, so I, just off the cuff, I'm going to make up a story for you, okay? Scary. But I'm going to do it. Okay, let's assume I'm going to give you option 1 and option 2, and you tell me which one is the better story. Okay. Boy is driving in the car. He's suspicious of his girlfriend. He thinks that she's been cheating on him. Okay? So he's driving down Main Street, just fuming, thinking of all the horrible, all of the time that they've had together, and didn't they have something awesome? I'm sure boys think like this all the time. Okay, you can laugh. I know it's early. Huh?
The good boys.
The good boys do. See, all of you do. Okay. Anyway, driving down the car, goes to his girlfriend's house, and he assumes that this boy is there, and he's mad. So he goes to the door, throws it open, and he sees his girlfriend and this guy making out. Okay, end of scene. Here's scene 2. Ready? Boy opens door and sees his girlfriend making out with the girl he's in love with.
That's really disgusting.
Did I say that wrong? Boy opens door and sees his girlfriend making out with a different guy. Sorry. Hey, it's the 21st century, right?
I think the middle one wins. The middle one definitely wins.
If I had candy, I'd throw it right now. Hard, but I'd throw it to you. Okay, what's the better story, though?
Number 2.
Okay, the real number 2, not the... No. Why is the second story better?
Because you don't know that he was suspicious of her.
Okay.
He thought that it was like a really shock for him.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely the second story is going to grab people closer. So many people, and there are studies out there that confirm this, that people will give you a page. And if by the end of that first page you haven't hooked them and given them some conflict that they have to turn the page to discover what's happening, then they'll shut the book. Guys, we're an immediate gratification society. That's how we are. And it's a little bit sad because a lot of the old classics didn't do that, and they're amazing books. But right now, in writing, you really do need to present that conflict right away. Now, does that mean there's no character building whatsoever? Not at all. In fact, as he opens the door, maybe he has something, he's thinking about something that, he's surprising her because, she might not remember, but this is their 4-week anniversary of the time they first kissed, or something really sentimental. And so when he opens that door, I know, maybe guys don't think like that. But my point is, something that endears us to him right as he opens it, so that punch is all the bigger. So that's why I said, but we better care about Johnny before you fling mud in his face. So how do we trick your reader into loving someone they just met? Yep, boys, pay attention. You need all the help you can get. Oops, I hit it twice. Number 1, first, no one likes a know-it-all. They can't be all good. Flaws equal good characters. You know who I think about with this? Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
He's a total jerk.
But he's amazing.
But we love him, right? Because he's quirky and he's flawed. And why do we as readers relate to somebody who's quirky and flawed? Because we are too. Every reader, when they look at something that you're right, when they look at a character, we try and see, we compare naturally, we compare ourselves to them. We compare whether they are similar to us or how they're different from us, but it's all a comparison. Nobody likes a know-it-all. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Also, make them sound human with killer voice. That takes me back to the Catcher in the Rye quote. Give them a voice. Give them personality. Some of the best books are the ones that you just... there are some books that I don't even care what happens. I'm so entertained by this one character that I'll read it for that. Really good voice. Does everybody understand what I mean by voice now? Personality in the writing. Personality. Okay. Here's another one. Break stereotypes. Do you know, I think you guys did how to build characters. Was that this class? When, Michelle?
I'm trying to remember.
We were,
Yeah, a
and
couple months ago, yeah.
and you filled out these things that have these questions about your character. Do you guys remember that? Questions about your character, and some of the questions were, what would be their stereotype, and how would you break it? Lois wrote a really good book entitled, I'm thinking of Spaces. Her first one was Cycles, and the sequel is Spaces. And there's this character, his name is Sam. And he's Polynesian. He's this big buff. He's actually really cute, but he's awkward and coming into himself, into his own, you know what I mean? And he's just entering high school. And anyway, you'd think that he would be this big jock and this big, just totally popular, and he's the biggest dork in the whole world. And throughout the entire book, he's referencing Star Wars and relating things to like laws of physics and science and trajectory and all of these things. And he had me laughing the entire time, and I liked him so much more because he was real, because he didn't have everything. So you expected him to be a stereotype, but he broke that mold. So break stereotypes, like to pieces. and then burn the pieces. Here's another good example. The Superman, you guys are, this is way before your time, but Fight for Fighting. Does anybody know Fight for Fighting? Oh, good. That really makes me feel good. The Superman song from Fight for Fighting. Who do you like better? The Clark Kent, the just absolutely perfect Superman character that, I mean, his hair even is slicked back and not even a strand is out of place, and he can fly, and he's a man of steel, and he's so good and ethical and all of these things. Do you like him better? Would you rather have a conversation with him? Or maybe somebody like this? I can't stand to fly. I'm not that naive. Moving on. Here's your point 3. Skip the backstory. This is the number one mistake that people make. We in the Teen Author Boot Camp, we have a first chapter contest, and we have just a huge number of entries. And that is the number one complaint I have about writers. And it's not just young writers, it's writers in general that are just coming into the craft. We feel like we need to make sure that our reader knows every detail about the story right from the jump. And that is a huge mistake. Why do you think that is? Why do you think? Okay, because readers like to discover. That's a really good answer. Why else? Okay, I open up a book. I don't really know anything about characters yet. I don't really know anything about conflict yet. But I do know that the trees are pink and that 200 years ago there was a king who... Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not personally invested in the story yet enough. I call it the rabbit cage. So pretend I have this rabbit cage. And I want to catch a rabbit. Call me Wile E. Coyote, okay? No, that's a roadrunner. You get the idea. Okay, so I have a rabbit cage. What I want to do is... I'm Elmer Fudd. Thank you. I needed that help. I want to get my reader to jump into this rabbit cage, but I can't just set the cage and open the door and say, okay, jump in. You know, you're going to love it. It's going to be great. I can't do that, right? So I have to dangle a carrot. I have to draw the rabbit over with a carrot. And my carrot is good characters, compelling characters, and a plot and conflict that are really rich and just so awesome and complicated that my rabbit has no choice but to jump into my cage. Once they're in the cage and once they've committed to my characters and once they've committed to my story, then I can start peppering in details about the backstory. Backstory is important. You need backstory, but you need to take your time getting it there. Trust your reader, rely on their curiosity to get them turning pages, and use it as a device instead of as a crutch, okay? Does that make sense? So here, oh, look, I even put it in there. Good. Okay, so you can have an immediate introduction to the aspects of your book, be it world building, setting, environment, that are interesting if you weave it into the action. And I just kind of said that. Here's another thing. Okay, so I need 5. I need 5 volunteers. Just right here. Bam. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can you guys come up here and just stand in a line right here? Don't trip on my cord, please, for both of our sakes. Okay, these are my characters. Let me introduce you to them. This is Pauline. This is Heather. This is Jason. This is Ronald. Sorry. I saw the orange shirt and I thought Ron Weasley. This is Ronald. Now you're going to remember him. And this is Beatrice. Okay? Tiffany. Okay. Who's this? Linda, we did get one person get it right. Her name's Heather. What's the problem? You guys can go sit it down. Thank you so much. Okay, yes, there's so much information, right? Right from the get-go, I've just introduced you to 5 characters that it's really hard to remember their names, except for Ronald. We're all going to remember Ronald. But why are we going to remember Ronald?
Because you said that he had
I gave an association, right? Big mistake in writing is throwing a bunch of secondary characters. We call them secondary characters if they're not our main guy, our protagonist, okay? So big mistake in writing is throwing a bunch of secondary characters into that first chapter. If they're in there, they better be dang important, all right? Don't just have them in there because they're going to be in the story at some point. Good planning makes an author choose a scene that really showcases that one character and maybe another, or at most 3. Try to keep it down, though, if you can. Otherwise, your reader is going to be confused. And they're going to go, have you guys ever read a book like that? Where you're like, okay, well, wait, which one is this?
Yeah.
I read books like that all the time, and I'm like, oh, are we talking about the blacksmith, or are we talking about the miller? You read books like that all the time, I'm sure. Okay, if the reader has questions at the end of the chapter, that is okay. Going back to the backstory. Definitely leave questions for your readers so that they can turn pages. Here is number 4. Beware the dream sequence. Again, going back to that first chapter content that we put on, so many of our kids start their chapter with a dream sequence. Now, we talked about starting a story with action, going right into the action, right? So if we start a story with a dream, it's like starting with hypothetical action. See the problem there? Especially those stories that you think that it's real life, and then you find out, oh, that was just a dream? As a reader, how do you feel after that? Kind of feel ripped off. Like, you lied to me.
I got gypped.
I don't really get that emotional, but I do feel like, dang it, So I feel like I wasted all that time, and it's something that I thought was real and was really just a dream. Dreams can be great devices in stories, and they're actually can be really effective in showing the subconscious state of mind for your character. They can be good in foreshadowing. They can be there's a lot of good uses for dreams, not at the beginning of your chapter, okay? Another thing to avoid is just waking up. Another one is waking up thinking about a dream. Again, get us to the action. Get us right there. I think you guys get that idea. Okay, so the last point in this is you want to leave your reader hanging. Now we're talking about the end of the first chapter. You want to leave your reader with this need to continue. Have you guys, good sitcom episodes that have these cliffhangers that you're like, what? Did anybody watch 24? This may be even before your time. Okay, 1.
Seem like an episode.
It's you've only seen it. Okay,
I used to watch them.
you all have an assignment. You have no accountability to anyone for it, but your own conscience.
I'll
Leave
leave
it
the first
cliffhanger.
season next week.
I know. I'm sure. It's the end of the school year, right? You can get by with that. 24 was a good example because every episode ended and you're like, what? No way. And you need to know what happens, but the episode's over and you have to wait. It's a device, again, in writing that good authors use. If they get you reading their book and reading it fast, then chances are it's a book that they will tell their friends about. And it's a book that you really are enjoying, right? Has anybody had a book that they just had to stay up at night reading?
Yeah.
Quite a few of you. Okay.
Yeah.
I hate that I love those books. But I love those books because it's just like, I can't even help it. And my husband's gotten to the point where he knows there must be a look in my eye or something because he sees it and he's just like, rolls over, puts the pillow over his head. But I've resorted to like a spelunking light. I'm serious. I have a little spelunking light that I put on, so because it doesn't cast light into the whole room, and I just totally read. It's because of this, leaving them hanging. Here's an example of the end of a first chapter that from the Teen Author Boot Camp first chapter contest. This was written by a girl named Haley Freeman. She's, what was she, 15? She's young. 15 years old, so she was the youngest age group for the high school category. And just to set up, I don't know where she's from. Anyway, the book was entitled Shattered. And just to set up the premise, there's this girl who's in love with this boy named David. They're engaged. They're in this snowstorm, and she's driving in this car behind him. And for some reason, I don't remember, it's been so long, but they end up on the side of the road, and something's wrong with the car. She hits his car. She slides into his car. That's what it was. Anyway, so they get out of the car, and when she hits the car, the trunk opens. Okay? So, and inside the trunk is a dead body. So she's in love with this boy. This is the end of the first chapter. So this is David. Do you trust me? His voice was velvet as he whispered the question again. At that moment, all of my thoughts became muddled. I couldn't see David as malicious, a man who had a dead body in his trunk, a murderer. All I could think of was David, my David. The David who bought me Starbucks and took me to theme parks and proposed on the top of a Ferris wheel after almost dropping the ring. The David that secretly wore Spider-Man boxers and hated pizza and told too many corny jokes. That David was not a murderer. He was the love of my life. And in that moment, I made the worst decision of my life, a decision I will regret forever. I whispered, yes, and followed him to the car. Dun, 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 right? That's good. That's really good. She actually ended up winning that contest. Really well done. And a lot of it was because of her hook. The writing was really good throughout, and there were a lot of other elements. But that hook was just left us as judges going, that was really good. I want to read that book because I need to know what happens, and I want to know why it was the worst decision of her life. Okay? Okay, so this is just in summary. Your first chapter is a promise. So by the end of your first chapter, your reader should have some sense of what the main conflict is going to be. They need to be able to identify the book's genre. So if this is a fantasy, they need to, even if you don't want to give it all away right at the beginning, there needs to be a hint, a little foreshadowing, something, so that by the time they get to page 50, which I know you're not planning to write till page 50, maybe you are, maybe you'll love the story. Yeah, there you go. By the time they get to page 50, though, they need to, and if you spring this, oh yeah, this is a sci-fi thriller, and they thought it took place in the Old West, well, I just gave you the plot for Cowboys and Aliens or something, didn't I just do that? Yeah, that's true. But you don't want to betray the reader. You should give them some idea before. So in that first book, we should know genre. Have a good sense of who or what type of person the main character is and how their world is changing. Because if it's not changing, then you have a problem. And we don't necessarily mean like apocalyptic world changing, but how their personal world, how things around them in their lives are changing. All right.